Hey, Juan here. In this video, I'm going to do a review of the product book, How to Become a Great Product Manager. The book has been written by Carlos Gonzalez de Villaumbrosia and Josh Anon. Carlos Gonzalez de Villaumbrosia is also the founder of Product School, which is probably one of the most famous product management schools or courses or trainings that you can get out there. This book actually covers quite many topics in product management, and you could argue if it covers all the topics out there that you can cover as a product manager. Probably there's always something else that you could cover, but it's a very in-depth book that goes through quite many levels and quite many layers to explain in detail all of them and how you should be working with them. So from my point of view, it's a very practical book to read if you want to be a product manager, or if you are already a product manager and you want to advance in your career and maybe develop how you are doing things. So the book is going to take a very practical approach, and it's going to tell you quite many things. I'm not going to try to cover all of them, because basically I would just be rewriting the book or doing a full course about how to do product management, but I will try to cover some of the main topics and what are my thoughts about them. The book obviously starts high level and it talks about the basics of product management, defining what user personas are, what different types of products are out there, B2B, B2C, and what are the most important differences when you're working in a B2B product or in a B2C product. The book is also going to talk a lot about data, using data to make decisions when you are a product manager, how to use that data that you have available, of the usage of the product, of the market potential that is out there. And they do a very good job at explaining you what are the different types of metrics that you have out there, what type of data do you have, what are segments, and how can you then look into segmenting, for example, your customers, creating cohorts, and so on. They also talk a lot about success KPIs and success metrics, and how to make sure that you can define success metrics that are going to help you identify if your product is being successful. And similarly to the Lean Startup book, it also talks about the differences between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. Vanity metrics meaning metrics that typically make your product look really good, but usually you cannot make actions out of them. So for example, the number of downloads of an app in an app store. Because the reality is that whenever somebody downloads an app, we don't even know if they ever use the app. So actionable metrics are going to be always much more important, obviously, than the vanity metrics. As well, the concept of NPS, Net Promoter Score, is covered widely in the book, because it's also a very important score for you to understand if users are going to promote or not your product. The product book also tries to be very practical and tries to help you to find ways of achieving your goals. In order to do this, it provides also a lot of information about the different frameworks that you could be using to make your decisions, make your priorities, understand the environment that you work, and so on. So for example, it talks and describes the 5C framework, where you can understand what is the environment that you're working, what are the products that you're building, who are your competitors, who are your customers, and so on, to help you understand and describe what is the environment that you are working in. It also will go in different prioritization frameworks that will help you prioritize your work, understand better which ones are those features or those products that are going to have more potential compared to those ones that won't have that much potential. So it also looks into things like the Anon model or the value versus effort frameworks. And basically the idea with these frameworks is to try to understand how much effort compared to the value that you are going to get when implementing a certain feature. Obviously, there's different frameworks. Some of them go into more level of detail, like for example, the Anon model goes compared to the value versus effort. And then of course, to understand better your positioning and the product that you're building and how you compare to other competitors, it also talks about the SWOT analysis. If you're not familiar with the SWOT analysis, it's looking into what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are the threats, and what are the opportunities out there to tackle. And frameworks, as always, and this is my thought, is not something that I'm maybe not the person that typically always says that everybody has to apply a framework. I think that one of the most important things to apply are the principles, and understand that you have some ways of working and continuous ways of developing that help you to be consistent when you're making decisions, when you're making priorities. I don't mean that you should not establish or actually adopt a framework. Actually, there are some very good frameworks. I have used some of them in the past, especially something like the value versus effort, but some of them can sometimes complicate things a little bit too much. And many times they're also a little bit open to interpretation. So it's important, I think, to understand the frameworks that are there and understand which one could actually help the most your team. And also pay attention that the team has to like and adopt that framework. And linking to the topic of prioritization, obviously, most of us, people that are working in product, it doesn't matter so much if you are a product designer or a product manager, you are going to have to look into seeing how you are going to prioritize the different ideas that you get. There is a very obvious thing, but it has to be stated. You cannot target every idea that comes to you as a product manager. It is just impossible. Typically, I cannot even tell what is the ratio. Probably I should calculate this. What is the ratio of ideas that you get, for example, in 1 year, and the ideas that you can actually implement within one team during that year? It's probably a very high ratio, which means that in most of the cases, most of the ideas you are going to have to tell no for one reason or another. Sometimes it's just because of capacity, you just don't have the time. And sometimes it's also the truth is that most of our ideas are generally not that great. It's just a sad realization, but something that we had to accept. And the earlier that we know that an idea is bad, the better. So what is very important here is that you are able to identify those ideas that are good and those ideas that are not good. Once you understand this, one of the things that you have to learn to do as a product manager is learn to say no. But learn to say no in a polite way. Help people to understand why no. Why there's an idea that they are proposing that potentially doesn't have a very high return on investment or ROI. Hey, we all love acronyms. So try to explain that, hey, when you are saying no to a certain idea, there is a good reason. There is an idea out there that you might be already working with or is planned for your roadmap that has a higher potential to have a higher return on investment on what you're doing. Think about this. Most of us work for companies that are businesses that are looking for profit. So obviously being able to keep the business running, keep the business going forward, and also pay attention to achieve the vision that your business is having, the higher return on investment you have, the better position you are to provide a better service and a better solution for the needs or problems that your customers have. The book then goes into talking about how to understand the customers, how to take the role of a customer, how to better get your mind into the mind of a user. Here is talking about several things like things that you have to take into consideration as a PM is that no matter how you test or you try, for example, a product or a feature that you are developing, you have to take into consideration that you yourself will never be an average user. Most likely you will be one of the most advanced users out there, because if you are a product manager, probably you know your product inside out, meaning that you are going to know all the intricacies of the product that your customers are not going to know. So it's very difficult for you to feel the same feelings that your customer is going to have. So one of the very interesting things that I found in this video is that it goes into quite a good level of detail of explaining how to drive interviews with the customers. So something that definitely I would very strongly recommend for you to read. And this topic is covered quite widely, so I'm not going to go into details of how and what the book is talking about, but one of the key findings is that always whenever you are talking with your customers, you have to take as much as possible a neutral position and always avoid leading questions. Another very interesting topic that is covered in the book are the different types of MVPs that are out there. And this is probably a topic that I could take as a separate video because it's quite wide and it depends a lot on the situation that you are in. Your MVP can be many things. For example, are you trying to do an MVP to identify if a problem is real, or are you actually building an MVP for the first version that you are going to launch of your product? If you are interested in this topic and understanding better what are the different types of MVPs that exist out there, leave a comment below. The next topic that is covered by the product book is the kind of type of documentation that you had to build for planning and building your product. So here it starts with talking about the PRDs, the product requirement documents, something that it depends a lot of who you talk, and it's a very hot topic. People are going to tell you that this is the most old type of documentation that you could create for a product, or people are going to still use it and be very happy about it. They offer a very good point of view here is that the PRD doesn't have to be this inflexible document that is created in the project, in the beginning of the project, and that it has to be treated as this truth that you always had to respect. And you do it in the beginning of the development of the product, and it will last untouched for months and potentially even years. But what the book talks is that your PRD can be an evolving document, that you start small and little by little you're adding more information and also correcting the initial assumptions that there has been established within the PRD, which I think that it's a very reasonable way of actually having one place for people to find the information about the project and understanding what the goal that is trying to achieve is. Many times when working in projects, for me, the approach sometimes is a little bit more similar to what a pitch deck is. But in the end, you want to answer similar questions and try to give an understanding of what your product feature is trying to do and how you're going to work with others. The PRD obviously can be a never-ending document, and you can include many things like designs, architectural diagrams, and so on. Another document that the product book recommends to do in the beginning of the product or the development or planning of the product is to do a press release or a review document of the product or the feature that you have been building. The idea here is that you could write from the perspective of an outsider how they would perceive the product that you are building. This is going to answer quite many of the questions that you are going to have when you're designing, when you're planning, when you're working in the especially early stages of the product, and things that typically are going to be very difficult to change in later stages of the product development. Another one that is very importantly covered here is the storytelling. Is that you want to use as much as possible storytelling when you are telling the goal of your product, when you're talking to others to explain what you're trying to convey, because people are going to typically understand better what the situation is. Probably something that I should use more in these videos and in this channel. And because this book is focused on product management and especially about product management within tech companies, of course, the topic of Agile is covered quite widely here. And the book talks about what Agile is and also the differences, for example, different ways of working within Agile, like Scrum versus Kanban. Again, something that could be the topic for another video. Let me know in the comments if you would be interested in it. And of course, planning, building a product, designing it is not just the end of the story. You also have to get your product to market. So go-to-market is one of the last topics covered in the book, and it's something that many times is overlooked by product managers because the focus many times is in the very early stages of the process, but you always had to get this product to the market, get it to your customers, get the feedback, understand how you had to continue evolving it, understand how you're going to promote it, how you're going to price it, how the users are going to purchase. Again, a really very big topic on its own. So what are my thoughts about the product book? I think that the product book is a great book. It's definitely tailored for people that are into product management. You could argue also that product designers could find it very interesting, but it's not so focused on the design part of products. Software engineers, architects, maybe data engineers or data scientists could find it interesting, especially if they want to understand the ways of working of other people working with products and planning them. The book obviously is focused for tech companies, so things like Agile are very relevant, and I'm not saying that Agile is only something that's relevant for tech, but obviously it's something that started with tech and something that is mainly implemented within tech companies, although there's companies out there who are trying or considering and implementing already Agile within their workflows. So when I think about the product book, especially when I compare it to books that I have reviewed in the past, like The Lean Startup by Eric Rice or Inspired by Marty Kagan, I think that the product book takes potentially the most practical approach of all these books. You could argue what is better. I think that there are just different styles and something that it depends a lot on which position you are and what is your interest. One of the books might be more interesting at a certain point of your development or in the moment that you are than the others. This doesn't mean that one book is better than the others. I think that all of them are really good books, but I think that the product book emphasizes on a very, very practical approach. And maybe here is the biggest con that I found in the book. And it might be just a matter of me using an audiobook instead of actually reading the book, is that at certain points it felt a little bit dry. This might be for several reasons. It might be because I think that, if I remember correctly, the previous books that I have been reading, they have been narrated by the authors of the book, whereas in this case it was not the author of the book narrating the book. Potentially felt a little bit more dry. Maybe the person was not as passionate about the topic as in the other two cases, or maybe that's just me finding a more practical book a little bit less entertaining. I don't feel that this is necessarily a drawback. It's just maybe not necessarily as potentially engaging as the other two books were. I want to emphasize that I don't think it's a bad book, especially not for that topic. I think that the book is a great book, especially if you are somebody that has been working in product management, maybe not for too long time, or you had not had the time because, hey, we all get caught up in the day-to-day and you want to improve in the way that you work as a product manager. So I will leave the link below if you want to go and check out the book. So potentially you can purchase, go read it, enjoy it, and don't take this review of the book as a replacement for reading the book, because the book goes into much more detail. It explains the concepts really well. So I would always encourage you to go and purchase the book, read it, listen to it, and enjoy and learn how to improve to be a product manager. There are many topics covered by this book, one of them being the MVPs. If you want to know better what an MVP is, go and check out this video. I will see you in the next one, and remember, stay safe.